Hi, and welcome to the Route to CISO podcast. It's me, Chris Rides. I'm going to be your host, and I'm going to be chatting to seasoned Chief Information Security Officers about their career journeys. We're going to be unencrypting their real-life stories and searching for the hidden keys to help you fast-track your cybersecurity career. Hi, everybody, and welcome to part 2 of my conversation with Adam Robertson. We were talking about at the time, talking about all different industries and working within different industries. And I was sort of thinking about it. You were obviously at Protivity a while, which is a consulting company. Going back on that conversation, do you think the fact that you'd worked in consulting before also probably opened up the fact that some people may think that you're less sort of stuck in one particular industry?
Yeah, definitely. At the time, especially, it definitely shows you can be adaptable. Right. And I think that's something that some companies would really admire and want in their employees. So I would say definitely yes. I mean, now it's been, 10 years since I've been doing that. So maybe not now, but definitely at the time when you're looking for that next position, I think it really does help play a big part in it. So yeah, 100%.
I think with all of that, probably working for a consulting company, working in different industries, building your network in different industries, that's absolutely key. I know how you've managed to get your roles previously, and a lot of that was sort of down to networking and building relationships and coming back and working with the same people in a new position. What would the advice be you would give right now for people that are either trying to move up into leadership or are out there sort of out of work currently, trying to make the move into a new role?
So to answer the second part of that, in terms of getting into a new role or breaking into cybersecurity in general, I'm probably just going to repeat the same thing. A million people have said in the past about the networking aspect of it, right? It is very important. People need to know what you're like as a person, because you can't describe your character on a Word document. So I'll give you an example, actually. Before I joined Protivity, I wanted to get that visibility in the industry, right, in the community, local community of cybersec. And OWASP is one of them, right? There's probably an OWASP chapter everywhere you go, so it's a good one. There's plenty of others as well, CSA and everything else. But I started going to those OWASP meetups just as an attendee. Went practically every time it was on, which was once a month at the time, I think. Went there for networking. It was, free beers and free pizza, so it was like a win-win all round. Can't complain at that. And it got to the point where, the more you go, the more you know the people, the more you talk to the people that organize it, the other attendees, right? And it kind of got to this point where the guy running it at the time wanted to step down, essentially. And they said, well, look, I will help, but I don't want to be the primary guy. I'll be secondary guy. I just want to help. It kind of got lost in translation along the way, and I didn't show up for beers one night, and I was volunteered to be, to run it. So always show up for beers with your friends, otherwise they'll stitch you up. That's my lesson for them. When I was running OSC, I had help, right? There were people helping me. But one of the responsibilities is, right, you need to try and find speakers that will come in and present. And it sounds quite easy, right? Well, we do one a month. If I can find 12 people, we're solid for a year. Yeah, it's not that easy, right? So it kind of forced me in a way to network. So there's networking where you go to the meetup and you meet people, right? And you have a beer with them and you build a bond and a friendship and all that. When you're kind of running the show and you have to get the speakers in, there's an element of pressure there, right? And so I'd spend my Saturday mornings before the wife woke up, because if I'm working on a Saturday and the wife's awake, if it's not a good,
big trouble in little OC.
Yeah, exactly. So I'd wake up a bit early on Saturday. I wake up quite early anyway, but anyway, I would reach out to random people, and there's something, I remember one example, right? There's something called Web to PY, and it's an open source, full stack, secure web dev, everything, right? Fantastic. And I knew about that from years and years ago when it was a little bit after it was founded. A buddy introduced it to me time before this. And I thought, well, that would be a good topic, right? Because Web to PY is not broadly known. Well, at least it wasn't back then, which I'm talking 10, 12 years ago. And so I just contacted them, right? I contacted the guy, Massimo Di Piero, and I said, hey, I'm running OSPOC. I'm looking for presenters. Any chance you or someone might be interested in coming in and just, our chat, just talking about how Web to PY is secure, already protects you from SQL injections, CSRFs, all that kind of stuff, right? He got back to me and he said, oh, yeah, how did you hear about us? It was like a long story, but through a buddy. And he said, let me reach out to some of the contributors to the project and see if there's someone local that would be up for it. So he then gets back to me a few days later and he says, hey, I tell you what, if I can do this, in June instead of May, and you can do it on a Saturday instead of a Thursday, I'm going to be in OC. Do you want me to do it? Oh, that'd be fantastic. So sure enough, right, the one of the founders of the Web to PY framework, he was, he's coming over for family business or whatever. Yeah. He came in, we did a Saturday OWASP-OC instead of a Thursday, and he presented the whole Web to PY, why it's secure from the OWASP top 10, right? So forced me a little bit out of my comfort zone because I'm not, I don't normally just randomly hit people up on LinkedIn and be like, hey, how you doing? And so that's one part of the story, right? And then through that, I knew a couple of other people that would go, and we ended up, there's four of us actually, we ended up entering I think Facebook put it on. It was down in San Diego years ago, and I think some of the Facebook engineers, security engineers and all that, they put on a little hackathon in like a little public place that they rented out. It was all free, right? You just basically showed up and they supplied beers, ice cream, pizza. So four of us cruised down to San Diego, and we did this hackathon. It's only like a one-day thing. Right? We didn't prepare for any of it. We just thought, we'll go down, we'll have a laugh. Luckily, my team was really good. So I was just, I was the token guy that didn't really know what he was doing. But
riding on their coattails.
They just drank their beer so they didn't feel left out. And we did this hackathon. I remember actually we were doing terrible. It's obviously a time thing, right? And it's like, get to the end and most points win. We were doing awful. And there's other teams that were coming round and they had like their, the girlfriends and whatnot there. You would hear them like point in the room because everyone had a roomie. We were like last place by like a jillion miles. Like it wasn't even close. There was only like 10 teams. So we were like 0 points, something like that. Because we were all drinking, having pizza and whatnot. And then we got to a point where we just tried a little bit harder and I was playing around with this like encryption thing and I started figuring it out and I was like, hang on a minute, no one else has done this. And it was a big, 50 points, whatever, I don't know. And so then I suddenly got that and one of my other buddies did this hack and, someone else. And suddenly all our points just shot up the table, right? We ended up coming third. I still have the little coin that says, third placed Facebook hackathon or something. It's a draw somewhere. But one of the guys that was on my team, he was actually working for Protivity at the time. Name was Adam Brand. Great guy, learned a lot from him. And he was the one that, within weeks after that, he'd known me a bit because of OWASP-OC, but then we did the hackathon for fun, whatever. He was then like, hey, we're always looking to expand our consulting practice. Interviewed there, and that's kind of how I got into it. But, when I went to OWASP-OC originally, I was looking at it as, let me build my network. Let me find people that are like-minded. Maybe I can learn from them. Maybe something comes of it. Maybe something doesn't, right? But it was more interest. And then it turns into fun because, like I say, there's a couple of beers floating around and a bit of pizza and whatnot.
Yeah, you meet some good people, like-minded people. Yeah.
Exactly. And so then, went from that to like this fun hackathon to an job, right? And then you're in that consulting world and, as we already discussed, that kind of opens different doors because of your flexibility and adaptability. So, yeah, I would say, I know the long-winded answer, but I would, again, echo what other people have said to people trying to make that change is the networking, right? But not just going to the networking events, volunteering. And I'm not suggesting jumping in the deep end and saying, like, hey, I want to run the show. That's a bit scary, but definitely say to the person running it, hey, is there anything I can do to help? Whether it's find a speaker or set up the tables or, order the food, just something. That kind of, ultimately you're sacrificing your personal time. And that shows that you're interested, in my opinion. If you're willing to say, I'll sacrifice my Thursday night and a Saturday morning, it goes a long way.
No, and I mean, you know a bit about my background, so you know that me and you are on exactly the same page with that, and I know through us working together that like finding people that volunteer and get involved there are always very high up in some of the things that you look for when you're hiring. I think that's a great story. I think there's a lot to be said, right? All of these organizations are run by volunteers and you can't do it without volunteers, and you can't get enough volunteers. Very rarely are people turning down people that are willing to help. And quite honestly, you don't have to have an official thing to be just like, oh, I'll just help you tidy up at the end of the meeting, right? It's amazing. People just assume it just magically gets done, but there's multiple people there that are still picking up plates and taking the trash out from the offices or whoever's been kind enough to give you the space. You leave it in a mess, you don't get that space again. So, yeah. And I think even, you meet people you connect with, and then you have these awkward conversations like I have with my wife where I'm like, oh, I'm going out and I've got to this conference. I'm super excited and I'm seeing so-and-so and so-and-so. And they're like, oh, and she's like, they're your friends. And I'm like, yeah, my friends. This doesn't sound like work. And I'm like, we're allowed to have work friends, right? All of a sudden I'm like, you're like, well, and they do turn into like, I've gone on a few sort of things with CISOs and friends and clients and other people, and end up a couple of days before RSA going on wine tasting events and stuff like that, which always very very jealous of, and definitely says, well, are you supposed to be at a conference 2 days early? And I'm like, it is work, I promise you. But the great thing about it is you end up like, say, working with people you genuinely like. You don't sit there and, you didn't ask for a job. You weren't saying to the person, can you hook me up? Can you get me in there? In the same way that I'm not going out there saying, oh, I'd love to help you fill your positions. Come, like, will you be my client? Right. I want to get to meet people. And if that stuff comes of it, which it will do, if you're good at your job, whether that's being a recruiter or being a security engineer, if you're good at it, people recognize that and then they want to work with you. Right. So I don't think you need to go knocking on doors and forcing the subjects. If anything, when you do, that stuff doesn't tend to work out so well. So no, not at all. I think that's an absolutely great example of that. Now, what I'm interested in is how you feel like with AI coming in over the last couple of years and changing an awful lot of stuff. Has that had any change on the networking? Has that made it more important, less important? Has that changed anything that people should be doing?
I'd say it's probably more important. I think the human element of life is way more important, right? It's from everything from, people applying to jobs, right, to the work being done. I see a lot of resumes come through from candidates, and especially over the last 6 months or so, they're almost identical. They're a little bit different, but if you kind of like, if you weren't reading the words, you kind of held them back a little bit, they're like 99% the same. They're just the same layout. You can just see it. And I think makes it hard as a hiring manager, because now I'm looking at the excellent resumes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 of them might be legitimate rock star people that, I'd give my right arm for to get on the team. But the fact that there's going to be the fluff of the 40 to 45 AI generated resumes, I can't read through them all. And even if I do, they look exactly the same. Who am I going to talk to? I haven't got time to talk to 50 people. It doesn't work like that. So I think the referrals is, not that referrals weren't useful before, but I think they're more useful now. And I think we talked about going to the local meetups, whatever they are. You're going to meet people who are like-minded, hopefully, that you eventually build that bond with over time. But I'd also say, look at your network, right? The mates you went to school with, they probably work at some company. They might be in something completely different, but there's a chance that company needs an InfoSec guy or an InfoSec girl or an IT whatever, right? Ask them. There's nothing wrong with utilizing people that are not a cybersecurity professional to try and get a cybersecurity job. So there's obviously a lot of benefits to AI. There really is. But it does make applications very challenging, right? You got the AI generating the resume, and then you got the AI ATS system looking at it.
Right.
And they say, hey, you look great, you look great, you look great. So there needs to be something different. And I think that's the human element, right? It's what's this person like? Are they good? Are they going to show up? Are they keen? Are they eager? Do they want to learn? That type of stuff. And like you say, it's not going to happen overnight. So start it today. If you can, get out there. Just do.
Yeah, it's looking for those nuances, right? And getting the people that say this person's good. The other thing that a lot of people are encouraged, like, find somebody in the business that can internally recommend you, but everybody's trying to find somebody. So if you don't really know the person and you're asking them to do you a favor or recommend you, those recommendations do go along with the person's name, right? So if I'm saying, I recommend, even as a recruiter, we've had this conversation where, like, look, here's the resume. Let me tell you a bit more about them. It's definitely worth having a phone call with the person and having a conversation. Don't think the resume tells the whole story. Right? I would go out on my limb to do that because we've spoken to the person, qualified them, we understand them. If you then start asking people internally to go out on a limb for you and you've never met them before and you're just hoping that they can do that, it's not going to work. And many people are asking the same question of all the people that are on LinkedIn. And so get to the point where you really do need to network and get out and meet people and have somebody that can recommend somebody to somebody else, right? It's your degrees of separation. Standing out from the crowd is more difficult than ever. And then I know you're bigger companies tend to silo a lot of people. And I know me and you have spoken a lot of times about siloing, and it's not something that you're a big fan of. How do you manage to sort of build your teams out without siloing them or still giving them the opportunity to have other areas of interest or skills to develop?
Yeah. I know this is going to change depending on the size of the company, right? Mm-hmm. If you have 150,000 employees, it's a very different story to 5,000 employees. The reason I like trying not to silo is because a few reasons. One is I don't want the person to get bored. Mm-hmm. Right? Sometimes if you get put in a role and that's it, it's great for the honeymoon period, right? The 3 months or 6 months. And then you get to that 9 months, 12 months, and maybe they're bored, maybe they get a bit longer, but maybe at the 2-year mark, they're thinking, what am I going to do next? Just be a senior of what I'm doing? But I don't enjoy what I'm doing. So in bigger companies, like I say, 100,000 employees, you might need that dedicated person. And there's a lot, the honeymoon period might last 3 years or 4 years or 5 years. But in smaller companies, it might not. what I also like about people getting exposed to as many areas as possible is then they have a much better perspective. Their input becomes way more valuable. And I always give this example, and I don't know why I pick on it, but I do. Vulnerability management, right? It's one of those things where, and I have actually spoken to candidates in the past where someone says, hey, I have 10 years plus in vulnerability management with whichever tool, they've got experience with. And it's great. We need it. They're an expert. They're going to come in. They're probably going to be up to speed in about 3 weeks because it's just, second nature to them. But they don't always understand other pieces, right? Especially on the business side. I know I've got a patch and I know I've got to tell someone, but they have no idea what the impact could be. They just know that they should be telling someone through a change control ticket. But it's similar with other elements of cybersecurity, right? So they're going to be this expert in whichever domain. That's one part of a puzzle, right? If I give you a piece of a puzzle and I say, what's the picture? You're kind of guessing a little bit, right? You're looking at it saying, well, it could be a dog, it could be a cloud. I don't really know, actually. Well, if I give you every piece of the puzzle, you know what the picture is. There's a learning curve to that. I think there are some people that don't want to do that because it can be overwhelming, and I understand that. And there are other people that really love it. And I'd say through the teams I built, it has been, some people have loved it for that they just love that kind of like freedom and exposure. And, they get a little bit bored of this domain, so they move over to that domain, right? That type of thing. And there's people I've hired that weren't used to that mentality and that way of working. And it took them a bit of time, right? It can take 3 months, 6 months or whatever. And they love it. They love like the fact that they can log into that system and log into that system. But it's not for everyone. I like it because like I say, I'm one of those people that doesn't want to get bored. So if I can be in 10 systems instead of one, I would choose that over anything. But again, different people prefer different things.
Yeah, but I mean, you're treating people the way that you want to be treated, and I think there's a lot to be said for that. And I know you personally, and obviously I know a lot of the people that have worked for you and with you before, and the headache always for me is like wherever you go, I want to keep working with you, but all of the people we've placed previously want to keep working with you. So you're filling your own positions with them. So you're backfilling them. So. But that's a great sign, right? It's a sign of a good leader, right? When people move on, and the fact that the people that are still there want to continue working with them is a great sign. So I think that's amazing. Now, if you look back, and this is a question I've asked a few of my guests, but if you look back at your whole career and you go back to the younger Adam, and you could give yourself one piece of advice, what would be that one piece of advice you'd give yourself?
Would say to put more effort in while you're younger and have the energy. I feel that, and I think I did, right? I think I kind of did a lot of self-studying and sacrificed a bit of time, but do more, learn more, be a sponge while you're younger, right? Because life kicks in later, right? You get married, you have the kids, you have a house. That time to learn evaporates. Right. So if you have the opportunity now, just study. I don't necessarily mean go to college or to university. In a course, you can set up a home lab, right? If you really want to show, and maybe that's a differentiator as well, right? Is your resume is hard to show cybersecurity experience when you don't have it. But if you have a home lab or a cloud lab, I guess these days, and you say, "Yeah, I've spun up all these open source tools." Yeah, an enterprise probably isn't running those open source tools, or at least all of them. Those tools fall within the domain, right? You can get an open source SIM tool, you can get an open source vulnerability scan tool. You can translate that, right? And so I think if I was younger, I wish I did that more. I wish I actually, we didn't have the cloud back then, right? It wasn't really a thing back in the dinosaur era. Home lab, right? I could have done that. I could have said, right, I want to learn more on InfoSec. Let me find some open source tools. And I know there probably wasn't as many around back then, but doing that, I think that's something that would have probably excelled me or accelerated me a little bit quicker. So take the time. Like, I know everyone's out there wants to have a party and all that and do it, but I could have probably spent more time on that. What would have got me where I wanted to be quicker. And that, I think that's another problem actually is, and I'm guilty of this, is when you're younger, you kind of chase the title or chase the money, right? Depending on which it is. Just don't. I mean, I know everyone wants more money and they need it, especially this day and age, but focus on just being extremely strong at the fundamentals, and that will carry you through for decades. Everyone's very, I don't say everyone, I find some people a very shiny toy, right? What's the shiny toy? Just because one company uses a shiny toy, the next one doesn't necessarily. So understand what the tool is doing, understand how it works, and you'll maintain that knowledge forever, and you can translate it or transfer it, from every single tool there is on the market. So don't rush it, but focus on the fundamentals.
Yeah, I like that. I think understanding how the actual tools work is more important than learning the tool itself. When, because if you pick one specific tool and you become the guru of that tool, and it turns out that some competitor ends up taking all the market share and that isn't the tool anymore, if you haven't learned how those types of tools work and you can't apply it to their competitors, then you find yourself sort of isolated and perhaps struggling to get your next role, right? Unless you really are lucky and that the thing you choose becomes the thing. So yeah, I like that. I also think when I think about your career, when you talked about it in part one, you talked about certifications and, you saw this certification sounded really interesting. And I think I want to ask you a little bit about that, because I think the way you discussed it is the way that I would love more people to be thinking about, because that's one of the most common questions we get, right? What certification should I be doing? And the truth is I can't answer that for people, because it should be driven by your interests. And if it drives your interests, you might end up using it more often or it getting you into a role. Back when you were looking at those things, what was driving you? How did you pick them? Because that sounded like that gave you the major opportunity to get into security.
Yeah, I think. So, yes, and I think that the one that interested me originally was that certified ethical hacker. It just sounded cool. And back then, you probably didn't meet many certified ethical hackers, right? It was a lot smaller.
Changed a lot, yeah.
Yeah, it's working a lot. I think certification, sorry if I'm drifting here, but I think certifications in general, they help.
Yeah.
The problem is you don't know if someone's gone down a 4-day boot camp and got a certificate, or someone's been studying the domain for 3 years and they just got the certificate to show they can do. And that's a huge difference. And so it's hard to know that from looking at a resume sometimes. And there's a very different value in someone that's been doing it for X number of years and just got the cert because the company said, hey, we got to spend this training money or it's gone next year. Which is the person that did that boot camp and they passed and they don't really remember anything from it. So
right,
there can be value. And I think I'm on your page as well, as I don't always like telling people what to do, or at least offering advice, because if they go do it and it doesn't work out, then I would feel guilty, right? So I would say, pick the domain you're interested in. When someone says, I want to get into cybersecurity, they obviously don't understand it, which is fine, that they're trying to get into it. But what interests you? Do you want to do governance? You want to write policies? You want to do blue team, red team? But what do you want to do? And I would even, again, I'd say maybe shy away from the certifications at first and focus on getting that home lab, right? Because you don't want to put money and time and effort into a certificate and then say, oh, actually, I don't like that, to be honest. I made a mistake. Building up a home lab with open source software and you don't like it, who cares? Spin down the VM, spin up a new one, right? So,
yeah.
And you can keep doing that 100 times a day until you find the thing you like. And then maybe you go look at a certificate, right? I mean, that's going to come down to what are requirements of jobs at that time. And if someone says you have to have this certificate, then yeah, that kind of forces your hand a bit. But if not, then I don't want to provide a recommendation. Sure, do what interests.
Yeah, I know. I totally agree. And I think, people are looking for somebody else to answer it. And, you can go on LinkedIn, you can go on Indeed, you can search jobs and you can see which ones are most popular to be asked. But you're absolutely right. If you turn up and you've got that, maybe depending on how the talent acquisition person's filtering, maybe that gets you through a filter. Maybe it's not important at all. I know for us, when we get them on job descriptions and we then talk to the hiring managers, it's almost always like a desirable and not even like a high desirable. Yeah, it'd be nice if they've got that just because, we know they've shown some interest. But then when you get into an interview and you have to sit down and talk about that domain and what you learn and how you've utilized it, if all you can say is I went down a 4-day boot camp and I can't remember much about it, right? Or all you can do is quote what you read in the book, it's not going to be that useful. I agree, actually, like pulling together a lab, or even just like a lot of the training materials free out there. It's completely free. Yeah. So you can pick a certification that you're in an area you're interested in and just go and do the training and look up what's online and learn about it. Make sure it's the one you're genuinely interested in before you go and pay for an actual, a test and to get that. And then that way you're also more likely to be able to talk about it in an interview. So yeah. I completely agree about that. We are almost at time. It's gone quick, right?
Yeah,
it's funny. It's funny when I tell this to people and I'm like we're going to need this amount of time to record. And like almost always they're like, well, that's quite a long time. But then when you get talking, see, I probably would be easier, like say, with a couple of Fosters, with us being Aussies, easier for that. But it goes quickly. So I want to ask one last question of you. And it's just really like, if you give one piece of advice, you've hired a lot of people, over the year, you've looked at a lot of resumes, you've interviewed a lot of people. If there's like one single piece of advice that you could give to somebody that's out there that's looking currently, maybe they have experience, maybe they don't, but a single piece that would work for everyone, what's the one thing you would say to them?
Oh, that's a $1 million question right there.
And then we'll build an AI thing to answer it, and me and you will turn it into a huge global multi-billion-dollar business.
It's how old though? So was the question to get into the industry? Is that
no, just like across anybody that's kind of looking. So whether they're trying to get in or whether they're already in the industry and trying to move jobs into something that might be something better than what they're currently doing.
Yeah, I'd say think about how you differentiate yourself. Right? A resume can, but not necessarily. Right. So what is different about you compared to the other 300 applicants that applied in the last 10 minutes? Right? Demonstrate your value. Whether you're coming from an IT admin role or a sales role or a first-time job, out of college, whatever it is, you need to be able to articulate the value you bring as well. So obviously, if you're lacking the experience, then you can't put that on your resume, but think about how you can translate it. Your experience can always translate somehow. And if you can get that across in the resume and the cover letter or in a networking introduction, again, I know all CISOs are different, but for me, I want to look for the person that's a little bit different from the other 100 people that have the same AI-generated resume. And so if you can somehow get that message across, you're going to stand out immediately.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing answer. I think know thyself, right? Knowing exactly what your background, what your skills are, understanding that, and then being able to translate it into what that company or the business needs, which means doing a bit of homework, finding out, what's out there. Combining the two is a quick way to make yourself like distinguishable from everyone else, as long as you can then put that message across. But no, it's a great piece of advice. Thank you, mate. I appreciate this. It's been really good. Learned a few things. Both of our dads, BT people.
There we go. Thank you for having me. And hopefully Spurs have a better season this year.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, let's hope so. I'm interested. The World Cup will throw a few curveballs, but it'll be interesting to see if we spend some money and where we spend it.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll see. Yeah. Anyway, that's it. If anything breeds resilience, it's being a Tottenham Hotspur fan. So maybe that's the other thing. I don't know whether either of us would recommend that to the audience, but it definitely is a way to build up thick skin and a lot of resilience. So there you go. You have to start young, though, I'd say.
Exactly.
Otherwise, people just think you're insane. If you choose that as a team, if you choose Tottenham as a team now, they'll just think you're crazy. So there you go. Good stuff. So thank you again, everybody. Thank you, Adam, for joining me. Thank you, everybody else, for joining me on this episode. And look out for our third guest coming soon. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for listening to the Route to CISO podcast. If there's something you really want me to ask on the next episode, or if you're a CISO who wants to inspire the next generation, please reach out. I'll leave a URL to my LinkedIn profile and make sure you connect and message me there. We're always looking for feedback, so please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.